check out the Comic Outlaw on YouTube. We'll be doing different stories. We'll be just discussing different things, and we'll be dropping the facts on our favorite mutants all month long. Yeah, and we're doing X Factor. We're doing a continuation. Now, let me explain something about this. This is a group of mutants that are pretending to be human in order to bring in mutants and sort of saving them. Like I said, this was a different time. This was in the 80s, and this is where mutant hating was still rampant. And we're continuing with that giant, basically a mutant version of Giant Man, and Beast and everyone are just trying to capture him. Kind of send him to prison. He ends up escaping, and he ends up meeting this woman called Frenzy. Now, Frenzy is a woman with incredible strength, skill. Basically superhuman package. Now, Beast is pretty much happy to be back. Back in the saddle again, as it was, doing what he does best. And it seems like this new recruit, his name's Rusty. He has a pyrokinesis, fire, and he kind of doesn't really know how to control it yet. And so he's been having problems. He's been learning how to train, but he's very impatient. And he's trying to get used to it. Like, on the other hand, we have Cameron Hodges, who kind of leads the team. They have another kid. His name's Arthur, and he kind of sees the present. But anyways, Angel and Jean Grey are having a moment where they're kind of renewing their relationships, and Scott has been distant because he has no idea to tell Jean Grey that he married literally a clone of her and then took off on her while she had a baby. Whew. A lot of drama in this one. Well, anyways, they go to meet this new kid, and he's kind of saying, like he's worried about being a mutant. And he starts crying, and this is basically the reality they face. Mutants are being hunted down, and this is where Artie and Rusty kind of have a moment. I think his name's Arthur or something like that, and he kind of sees like himself, or he sees Rusty kind of exploding, and he's trying to wonder, who he is, what's going on, and he gets accosted by this dude, who's trying to rip him off, rob him, calls him a freak, and his pyro powers kick in, and boom, burns his hand. Now, Frenzy is kind of telling him, you're coming with me. My orders are to take you in. And, he's just basically not down for it. Although he doesn't have a whole lot of control over his powers, he is powerful enough to, like, get her to let go. But with her super strength, she just slaps him aside like nothing. And, of course, they're going out, they ask where Artie is, and Artie's trying to disguise himself, it's a little cute moment, I guess, as the fight carries on between Rusty and Frenzy, and she's just too much. She's about to take him in when Beast jumps into the fray, as long as, and the rest of the X Factor, too. And, they do work as a team, Cyclops blasting the rock that she had, Angel coming in for the blow, Iceman freezing her. But it's still not enough, she busts out of it, she escapes. They give chase, but she literally knocks down a building to get away. And they kind of, start interrogating, not interrogating, but asking what's going on. And he's afraid of being alone, he's afraid of measuring up. And Cyclops kind of explains that there's two groups of mutants out there, and that we're always being hunted and prosecuted, and we gotta, do something to make up for it. And then as Frenzy is contacting her boss, kind of basically saying their mission was successful, but they get another shot, of course. I'm keeping all the titles in these storylines, all the covers, because I think they're cool. It also gives me some time to reflect, and kind of give you a little bit of what's going on. Like, this guy's being chased right now by a new team, a team of evil, and I'd like you to keep a particular eye on this girl called Skids. Now, these guys are sort of a spin-off of Masters of Evil, except they're all mutants, which will come into play later. Now, we have X Factor, of course, doing their thing, training, and it's funny how they're supposed to be like a government type of humans hunting mutants, And anyways, hijinks ensues as Iceman does his thing, freezes Beast's legs, and he goes down for the count, but it gets a little assistance from Angel, and Beast hangs Iceman out to dry. Cyclops shoots him down. Jean Grey gives him a little spin, and the prank is on the prankster. Now, there's a phone call being in play. There's a man sweating, thinking. He feels trapped. He calls this lady, this woman, warning her, telling her to stay away, someone is after him. But elsewhere, Beast is looking for new clothes, and he decides to put on a suit that just looks horrible. I mean, even for the 80s, wow. But Beast isn't used to wearing clothes in a long time since he was basically covered with fur. The girls decide to go for it. The date ensues. Cyclops is with Arthur and Rusty, and they're trying to learn their powers. And Artie seems to get like this weird feeling. But of course, Cameron Hodges is there, and he's kind of giving the government spiel on what's going on, their purpose and how they're going to go about things. And as for this blonde woman, she's captured. She's captured by this group, this organization by Frenzy. And she's basically leverage for what we'll find out later. Now, as X Factor begins to get ready to leave, they show up at the apartment. They find this guy knocked out, and he basically kind of, wakes up, and all hell breaks loose. Everyone starts fighting. Everything starts going awry. The X Factor decides to change their old uniforms after everything dies down. He kind of explains the situation that he's a doctor, and that his wife is kidnapped, and he needs to find her quickly, and there's someone out there that has her. And he gets kind of calmed down by Beast, which is his friend, and they get interrupted by this group led by Frenzy. And of course, they want the guy, and they're going to try to take him. And of course, they have the wife as kind of a hostage, and he uses his power, which is kind of an odd power. It's one of those weird random mutant powers that end up getting changed later. And of course, Angel takes one right in the back, and the fight goes on. You see a lot of Jean Grey's power boost, which is very cool. Jean started to step more into the forefront. Cyclops, of course, using his power, but Frenzy just knocks him dead out. And this is one thing about Frenzy. She is, if not effective, and vicious. Now we meet the man behind the shadows, the man that captured him, the man that this man refers to as Master. And he is the one, the only Apocalypse. Yes, this is the first appearance of Apocalypse, and the story does continue. And we're going to bring it to you right now. And as our story unfolds, the government's kind of getting used to X Factor, the public's getting used to X Factor, and they're kind of just sort of putting on a show. But now that they've kind of woke up and they're kind of figuring out what's going on with Apocalypse, they're going to go rescue this guy who basically has a power, who has information. They need to find out who basically took this guy and where. And basically they're just really not having it. But as you can tell, there is tension amongst the team. It's the drama that's been ensuing, and they're wondering if they're still kind of under the influence of Apocalypse and that guy's power. The cops are kind of getting worried. Everybody sort of escapes, and Angel, of course, who's insanely rich, drops a bunch of money down there. Just basically tossing it off. Like, here, I got the bill. And the X-Men make their next step. As they kind of calm down and realize what was going on, that they're being manipulated. And of course, they take this guy prisoner, and they kind of beat the crap out of him a little bit, kind of just messing with him. And they decide, that eventually they'll take him down to the Master. And someone touches this girl, and she just uses a big old attack, energy everywhere, boom. And it's enough to get this attention of the X-Men, who kind of go off in that general direction. And literally everyone's weakened by this, and Frenzy's about to finish this guy off, and Apocalypse shows up in all of his glory. I mean, look at him. As tough as Frenzy is, he's able to take her out with one punch. And he just starts going to town. He sits him into the machine. And for Apocalypse's own reasons, he's changing him, mutating him even further. And of course, X Factor's trying to get their way in. They're trying to dig in, fly in. Anyway. But they split off into teams, Angel and Jean, and of course they get into a fight. And Beast kind of does surveillance. He kind of crashes in, and they start looking around, looking for his friend. And he's hooked up to a machine, and he fights Apocalypse. And Apocalypse just basically destroys him. And of course these guys are dealing with basically Frenzy's team, and they're basically just there as a distraction until Apocalypse just fulfills his purpose with this guy. And that girl's there as well, and they bust in. They see Apocalypse for the first time, and they take out the other members of the team one by one. And Apocalypse machine gets started, it starts going, it starts moving, and it starts changing him. Now, Cyclops shoots a beam through him. Apocalypse kind of molds, around it. And Apocalypse's powers from the get-go are very interesting. And of course, he vows vengeance. He basically makes his vow, does what Apocalypse does, and they leave him there for they already got what he needed. Apocalypse is always wheels within wheels, plans within plans, and now they have to figure out what they're going to do next against a superior opponent that's lived thousands of years. And this is a interesting one. The X Factor basically is going to round up some quote unquote mutants and capture them, or AKA try to bring them into the fold. But they're going to find something a little bit more devastating later on. Now, they're basically just doing different missions, doing recon, kind of working for the government, doing what they do, bringing in mutants, saving the day, basically just being kind of like a public face superheroes, And they're taking a little time off right now, and they're getting into the. Basically, Cyclops is facing the same situation that we've talked about. Left his wife, this and that. And the tension's kind of boiling over with the group. As you can see, there's tensions between humans and mutants, and people speaking out against it, and protests going on. And it's basically just a kind of reminiscent of the 60s, where there's violence actually happening in the streets. Meanwhile, these two Morlocks right here, and I do forget their names, but it's really not important. They realize that they're being hunted. There was some kind of explosion, and they're going out to hide. Now, as the protests keep going on, they decide that they ought to play a game of tag, which is one of their old school games. They basically tag everyone, and who's ever last is last. You gotta kind of touch them or use your powers on them, redirect the blow. Pretty cool, pretty fun training. And then someone spills the beans, and Jean finds out that Cyclops is married, and this creates all kinds of hell. Now, as this girl Skids, she's kind of going out on her own, figuring things out. So is Rusty. Rusty's kind of lost too. And later on, these two will find each other, and it's going to be an interesting pair that will last a few years. But anyways, these Morlocks are getting caught by the cops. They're getting gunned at, shot at, and they're trying to run. And of course, the phone call comes in, needing X Factor to go and save the day. But they're having personal problems right now. Like, Jean is really having problems with this. It's very difficult. I mean, he literally just married a clone of her. And Angel, who's always been in love with her, is using this as his opportunity. And here comes X Factor to quote unquote save the day. And they're trying to calm the situation down by taking them out but not killing them, so they can figure out what's going on. They know they're just basically being hunted. And, they're finding out that someone has been trying to use atomics, and that catches their attention. They follow them in, and I like their G-Man suits, which is absolutely hilarious. But anyways, they go in, they capture the Morlocks, and this other team, this Alpha team, is from the government. Like I said, there's government sponsors, there's government stooges, government troops, and they kind of had to circumvent that, get a little minute with the mutants. They kind of tell them what's going on. They're being hunted. They live in the sewers. That's basically who and what the Morlocks are, and they kind of discover that underground kingdom. But this is that issue I was telling you about. Moving on from that we'll come back to that later. This is where Rusty and Skids kind of meet. They have like a little romance, and this is the X Factor, doing what they usually do, government work. And Jean is having a moment, where she's just essentially pissed at Cyclops, and she wants to know the full scoop. And he shows a picture of her and the baby, and it just kind of pisses her off, that he just left her. It was very cold blooded, and just kind of stringed her along for a while. And this proves, Cyclops isn't as good as he thinks he is. And of course, Beast and Warren are kicking back, everyone's relaxing, and Rusty and Skids are kind of getting to know each other. And of course, Arthur and Rusty are pretty close now. And, they get visions of the G-Men, they get visions of this, an interview. And like I said, Arthur's stuff is very random. He doesn't exactly know how to control his powers yet, so different images pop up. And of course, they're doing their training, and they're having talks about Scott, the wife thing, which Iceman and, a few of the other members didn't know about except for Angel. And this is the Freedom Force right here. They're kind of leftover Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but they sort of work for the government, kind of like the Suicide Squad, doing missions that no one else would do. But Spider-Woman's with them this time, and they do have a mission to bring in Rusty and Skids. because of the mischief that he caused, and basically to find out what's going on with X Factor. Now, as you can see, the group's having internal problems. This love triangle between Scott, Angel is kind of, and Jean Grey is kind of like reaching its apex here. And you gotta love that it looks like he has a box for his wings, but that's really not true. It's kind of funny. And of course, Arthur shows them pictures of a helicopter, I do believe. And this helicopter is actually carrying the Freedom Force, which is Blob, Pyro, Destiny, Mesquite, and Spiral from the alternate universe. How, I don't know why, but it's just awesome. Anyways, they land, they find Rusty, they're going to take him in. Spiral does her little dance, which allows people to teleport. And Destiny's getting the feeling that something's coming around the corner. And of course, it's the G-Men, doing what they do, firing their guns and doing what they do best. Now, of course, these G-Men are a little bit more than G-Men. But Skids does kind of get free, she starts going. And they set up a Spider-Woman, kind of spins a lot of webs, traps her, does a tackle. And of course, Rusty kind of escapes too, and they end up running away together. It starts a fun little Bonnie and Clyde thing as the Freedom Force does chase after him. And this, of course, is in front of the press, and it just kind of shows the press in the 80s and 90s where the scoop was more important than anything else. Skid's powers are interesting. She has like force fields, allows her to fly, and they try to fire gas at Rusty. He just burns it, and they find out they make a good pair together. With the Freedom Force on their tails, the X-Men show up, and of course the rumble is going to start between X Factor. I'm sorry, I said X Factor and the Freedom Force. It's a lot of teams, it gets confusing. And of course, they're having this moment. The Freedom Force is saying, we're going to take a minute. It's interesting that Mesquite turned into Uncle Sam. It's sort of funny. And the fighting ensues. The Freedom Force isn't known for their tact. They're not known for their kindness and bringing people in, but they get the job done. X Factor shows up, of course, dressed as some of the G-Men, trying to get the scoop, looking for Freedom Force, hoping to rescue their friends. And that they could get the job done. They're basically looking around, checking their contacts. And I know I keep going back to this, but I think it's hilarious that he has a pack for his wings. I mean, it's just too funny. And of course, Rusty and Skids are on the run from the Freedom Force. They find their powers work pretty good together. Like, she's able to stand up to his flame. But of course, the Blob, who's surprisingly fast, kind of shows up out of nowhere, grabs him. And the run fight kind of ensues again. It's basically just a big chase. And of course, the Blob shows up. X Factor's on the way. And of course, Destiny just kind of starts explaining to Mesquite that these people don't like us. They know that we're mutants. They're even throwing eggs at Spider-Woman, which is kind of funny because she's an Avenger sometimes. And, basically X Factor, Freedom Force show up. They both show their papers. They're both working for the government. And basically the Freedom Force is here to bring these people in, and they have all the paperwork to do it. This kind of contradicts what X Factor is doing, since they're both on the quote-unquote team. Arthur, of course, is getting visions of the fight, of things going on, Spider-Woman, and who wouldn't want visions of Spider-Woman, if you know what I'm saying. But anyways, his visions pop into place, and he disappears off somewhere deep into the sewers. And of course, they go looking for him, and he meets this kid called Leech. And they end up being friends. Leech has the ability to kind of stunt people's powers. And Rusty's down there, of course. And the Freedom Force is still chasing after him. Kind of slams him in, getting ready to take him into custody. Cyclops, X Factor shows out of nowhere, and the fight starts again. And I think it's interesting that Spider-Woman's actually on this team as kind of like the good guy liaison. You'll see that later with other X titles where the bad guys are kind of led by a good guy. But Skids and Rusty are trying to run again. I love how they kind of get Pyro, they kind of freeze him, and then they just blow up his pack. Because he can only control fire, he can't make it. And of course, Spider-Woman's hard to take down, she's a hero and everything, but Beast kind of grabs her. They have a moment where they fight, they toss around, and they end up recovering Rusty, and they end up recovering Skids. And they fly everyone out. Angel grabbing Rusty, and of course, Marvel Girl using her powers to lift Skids up. and now they're kind of having problems with the government. They lost their tail, they lost their lead, and this doesn't look good for them. But we're coming to an important part, the 10th issue, and this is something that goes on called the Mutant Massacre, and this is why Arthur's going down there. There's a lot of issues involved, so I'm just kind of skipping that so you kind of get the storyline of what happens here. The Mutant Massacre is a bunch of people that were led or gathered together by Apocalypse to just kill the Morlocks, and it included people like Harpoon, Sabretooth, and even Gambit, that we found out later on. But anyways, this group of mutants is killing the Morlocks, these underground deformed mutants, and Apocalypse kind of looked at it as a cleansing. But all hell is breaking loose. They just got back with Skids and everyone. They realize that Arthur's gone, and they go looking for him. And of course, this leads them into the sewers where these Morlocks are just being slaughtered left and right. And they're trying their best to try to help out, try to get them away, and the fighting starts. I mean, Cyclops is just not having any of this. He's using whatever power he can. He's blowing stuff away, and of course they do a cave in so the bad guys can get away, so they can run away and continue their mission. And of course, Skids wants to go. Marvel Girl stops her, uses her powers, and just kind of just knocks her out. And of course, these Morlocks are on the run, and who jumps out of nowhere? Good old Victor Creed Sabretooth. Claws that one Morlock. Cyclops takes him down with an energy beam. They kind of grab the mutants, and they're hiding right now. Everyone's on the run. And of course, these guys are basically wondering what's going to happen. They're going to lose their government funding. They're worried about that. But this fight is going basically downhill. I mean, all these different mutants, creatures from the Savage Land, Mr. Sinister's creatures like Vertigo that was created by him, they're just using their powers and they're basically overwhelming him. But X Factor's a great team. They've worked together very often. Arthur is worried. He's got another vision of them running around, a little wounded, but... And of course, Angel and Marvel Girl are together. They're talking. They're working out their situation. They're trying to figure out what's going on. Marvel Girl is kind of getting this weird feeling. They share a hug. Of course, Warren's ex comes in. It turns into a big fight. She ends up breaking up with him. Of course, Angel flies off, looking around, realizing that something's wrong, and they're being called to the sewers. And, Creed's just basically murdering people left and right. Basically what he does, and Apocalypse is joining in the fun. And, of course, they show up. Cyclops does a big beam, which is what he always does, and everyone's joining into the fight. And they kind of turn each other's powers against each other. Iceman gets smashed. All the X-Man, X-Factor, everyone got wounded in this. I mean, Thor was even in this fight. They take Cyclops out, who's hurt, and Jean leads them out while Angel finds a kid, but he gets attacked and jumped by Vertigo and some of the other creatures. Mr. Sinister's group, and Angel fights valiantly, but he's just overwhelmed. There's too many of them. This guy named Harpoon, guess what he does? Harpoons Angel's wings to the wall. He could feel them broken, battered, and yes, Angel has fallen. What will happen the next time? What will become of our hero? We'll find out, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Laters.